Everybody, welcome to the Uninformed Banker. My name's Gerald, and today we have Aaron from Drunkenomical, one of my favorite podcasts.
Drunkenomics. Sorry to cut you off, but
He's right.
Drunkenomics.
He's right.
No worries. Drunkenomical is what I want you to be, but Drunkenomics is the name of the podcast. So
Well, I've been Drunkenomical tonight, so I
nice.
apologize for that.
Good on you. Sorry to just trip up your
No, you
intro
were
like
right.
that, but
I definitely messed that one up.
you're all good, my man. So yeah, but anyways, it's good to be here, man. I appreciate you reaching out to me on Instagram and being interactive with us on social media. And to all your listeners out there, I'm sorry for all the background noise from my microphone because I am sitting outside enjoying a nice cigar because Gerald has extended that courtesy to me and I'm taking full advantage of it. So thank you.
Well, thank you for being on.
My pleasure.
And thank you for answering me because every time I'm on it, I interact with you more on Instagram than I use Instagram, which is probably not good. I'm trying to get better at social media. It's really
You and me
not
both.
my
I'm
thing.
terrible. Yeah, I'm terrible. I do what I can, but I know I suck. So
I got my first I think it's like my first not audit. My first where they like block it and they go, it was a fact check off of a quote with a picture on it.
Seriously?
Yeah. And I put the artist of the quote and they were like, there's no proof that this artist did this. I'm like, but I didn't do this. It was an artist.
Well,
It
yeah.
was like,
I don't know. I don't know what my feelings are on that kind of stuff. I mean, if you misquote someone, like I mean, I understand it could be, and I say that with a lot of emphasis on the could.
yeah.
It could be libelous. And you don't want that on your hands, but I mean,
It was some Russian from like the 1700s. So I get
so
that.
I don't know. I don't think he's gonna come back from the dead and sue you for libel, but
Yeah.
whatever.
I just couldn't believe it. I'm like, wow, I got my first fact check.
Yeah, dude, I think it's a badge of honor. I mean, I don't
That's
know.
how I took it. I was like, it's like my third Instagram post, and there we go.
Well, considering all the fake things that are said and posted on Instagram, that has been gotten away with. You got caught,
Oh
which
well.
is a badge of honor.
Oh well, it is what it is. No, but I wanted
Yeah.
to talk to you about basically the market because I mean I was listening to a little bit of your last episode this morning. Unfortunately, I got cut off because I had
No.
a meeting about it being
Yeah.
overvalued. So, and
Yeah.
I don't know even how to go
Um,
into that because I'm
Well,
both approaching it with trepidation and a little
uh-huh.
bit of like, well, the
Well,
market's going to do what it's going to do. So I'm not going to not
it
take
is.
advantage, but yeah.
Right. So this is the thing is I think there's so many factors as to why this stock market is overvalued. And to me, there's so many reasons, but I think ultimately what it comes down to is there was more money, and I said this in my episode too, but there was more money that went into the stock market, right? The SP 500, even penny stocks, options, ETFs, mutual funds, all those things. There's more money that entered in all those securities than, in the last 15 months than the last 12 years before that. And not to mention the last 12 years before that, what happened to the S&P 500? Well, it was coming out of 2008. So, 12 years before 2020, we had this massive run to the upside. If you bought in 12 years, I guess at this rate, 13 years ago, you'd be doing just fine. Like you would have made plenty of return on your investment in the S&P 500. But if you bought in 15 months ago, you would have done the same thing. Like the amount of return you would have received your investment if you bought in 15 months ago versus back in 2008 would have been similar if you just bought like a regular S&P 500 index fund. And that's to me why the market is super, quote unquote, overvalued.
Mhm.
That's why PE ratios are all-time highs because when there's more money in that certain thing will become more expensive. There's more money in corn's going to be expensive. There's more money in lumber's. So that's essentially what it is. Insane demands, insane volumes. I mean, these historic volumes, ridiculous. And that's why I think the markets are behaving the way they are.
Unfortunately, like for anyone that's worried out there, because I will admit I'm a little bit worried, but I'm also of the mind of like, well, I'm worried, but what do I do? Do I say, oh, I'm not going to be in it and just say no to these deals in some areas? And, I'm not going to be not involved, because
I
people were worried about inflation in 1979, and the people who hedged against it actually lost.
And yeah, and I hear you. And this is the thing about inflation is there's two real ways to behave against inflationary pressures. One, buy stocks. Why would you buy stocks when we're facing inflationary pressures? Well, because you have extra cash. What else are you going to do with that cash? You don't want it to inflate. Hedge against the inflation by buying a security. It goes up. Hopefully, the return on investment is greater than the loss you would have experienced had you just sat there in cash because of the loss of buying power due to inflation. I don't know if that makes sense. You might have to listen to that, but
no, I get what you're saying.
Yeah. So that's the first reaction. And the second reaction is, well, whatever stocks you have, you need to sell it because that loaf of bread costs more. You can't pay for that in Apple stock. So
that is true.
You got to sell Apple.
Although you can buy some stuff with Bitcoin, I've heard.
You can buy what? Yeah, I mean, you can buy Oakland A's tickets, but you can't. And some places are starting to let you go into their stores and buy, a trench coat with Bitcoin. But for the most part, I mean, last time I checked,
you can't
at my local pub, my Irish whiskey I couldn't pay for in Dogecoin or Bitcoin. So
that's true. They should take Doge. Saying.
Yeah, that's the most reliable one, right? It's a joke.
I could definitely see, like, in the history books somehow Doge remaining, and they'd be like, yeah, in the 2010s or the 2020s, they invested in this joke coin about a dog, and it ended up winning out. And like, that's
that's
you go like, what?
No, yeah. So I don't know. That's my view on the markets. Do you want to avoid the markets because it's quote unquote overvalued? Absolutely not. I think there's plenty of opportunities in undervalued names. I think there's plenty of opportunity in undervalued names, and and at the same time, anymore, what happens when there are inflationary pressures, or not even inflationary pressures, but what happens when people are scared of this overvaluation? They're not necessarily selling their stocks and cashing out. What they're doing is they're rotating from high PE names like the tech names like the Googles and the Teslas of this world.
Yep.
And they're rotating into lower PE names like Kellogg's and Kroger and Campbell's Soup and Walmart, right? McDonald's, all those low beta, low PE names. So that's essentially what we're seeing in the markets, or at least what I've been seeing.
It's funny you say that because I actually just got out of basically a healthcare ETF because it had been lagging basically the market the last, I don't know, year plus. And I finally made my like 25% or whatever, but it was so far behind. I went, I want to keep, like, I wrote it on the wall. I have a wall here. And I went, I want to keep you on deck for when October comes, because there's an area like biotech for the last 4 out of 5 years goes down come sometime in September. Now, this isn't for everyone, and I should definitely say this. None of this is financial advice. My channel is called The Uninformed Banker. Uninformed. So to anyone else,
formerly uninformed, yes.
Like, I don't know what I'm talking about. This is not financial advice. Do not take it like that. This is comedy. This is just entertainment.
Yeah.
Take it at that. But biotech has done very well right up until like the middle of September or the first week of September. And I'm thinking I'm going to rotate out of that.
Sorry to cut you off, but you're saying year over year, every around this time, September, October?
Every year except for COVID, which kind of makes sense when everyone's like, oh, biotech, they're going to make some drug that's going to fix. And a lot of people rotated into that.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And so obviously it didn't have to touch any support levels, just kept going up. Yeah. Just kept breaking through. Yeah. No, that makes total sense. I mean, my thing with biotech or any sort of like healthcare, like all the healthcare names was like, I think the last, like since COVID started, really, like everyone has been kind of arguing, like, is healthcare is it a value name or is it a growth name? Like not a growth name, but is it a value sector or is it a growth sector? Well, I mean, it's not a value sector. It's definitely not value either. I mean, I don't know what
I think it's more just defensive, because like the way mine was broken down was like biotech and healthcare are different. And then you have like medical devices such as
Right.
Medtronic, et cetera. Like that's an entirely different. And then you have healthcare staples, which is actually, I think, could be growth.
So what are some names in healthcare staples? Like,
They would be
uh,
like Medtronic, 3M. Um,
uh, but
I can't think of any
yeah,
others
but the
off the top.
problem with a lot of these names is like they're very, and when I say expensive stocks, I mean, yeah,
They
the
are
stock, the
$200 a share.
yeah, the share prices are expensive, yes, but the PE ratios are insanely high too.
Mm-hmm.
So that kind of disqualifies it as a value name technically, right?
Yeah,
Um,
you're not
and
getting the value at a $200 share. $200 a share.
Well, yeah, and you're just not getting value out of 30 PE, right? I mean, technically,
Yeah.
it's like Warren Buffett would be like, "What is going on?" This because Warren Buffett's the value guy, right? So,
Mm-hmm.
he like if he sees a 30 PE, I mean, it's like your
He's not
projections.
looking at it anymore. He's like,
Well,
I'm out.
yeah, well, yeah, the terminal, well, either that or the terminal value just has to be fantastic, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, um, you know,
Sorry, that's
at
my
the
dog.
same, I know you're good. And at the same time, it's like, is it a growth name? I mean, they've seen so much growth already. It's like, how can it really be a growth name? How much more can these names actually grow? But then again, that's what we saw with Apple. Is Apple a growth name or a value name? And we've been debating that for the last 2 years, right? And in the 2 years, they added over $1 trillion in market cap. So, like, so what, like, how much more can Apple grow? But it's not a value name because it's got like a 35 PE or whatever PE it has. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So
That all comes down to like the individual investor. I mean, I think you're right. Like it comes
yeah, what
down,
yeah,
it,
what do you perceive as growth? What do you
yeah.
perceive as value?
Like I got to admit, I was, when I texted you earlier about RM,
Hmm.
granted, did I have a really good feeling about them because I had read through like the last three earnings and I saw their strategy. It paid off. And I'm like, okay. I looked at other
Hmm.
banks and I'm like, all right, I see what's happening. They're a little bit behind the curve. Like they report later than all the other banks.
Yeah, and I looked at them. I remember they're fundamentally they look great. So
Mm-hmm. And but if you notice, their earnings per share and revenue did go down comparatively. Like if you look at
uh
their last couple of quarters, it did go down, but it was like they still beat, I mean, 20 something percent on each. But last quarter it
right.
was 90 something.
Hmm.
And so like I can already see the music stopping playing there. And that's what's happening all across the banking sector, at least in the smaller banking, like Ally.
Well, yeah. Well, I think the banking sector, what I think really I think what they're looking at is, the household debt in America is already super high. I mean, it's like
Like how
where
high
I
can
think
it go?
yeah, it's super. And these banks, most of what they do is they capitalize on lending out money,
Mhm.
right? And
Yeah,
this
like your
is
loan growth. How
yeah,
many?
and we saw this kind of in 2019 when banks couldn't loan money out. They just like in 2019, right before COVID, banks couldn't loan money out. That's why we kind of had that reverse repo or the overnight repo rate crisis that lasted for like 2 seconds because COVID became the main thing that everyone talked about. But there was a overnight repo rate crisis back in 2019 because banks just had too much cash. They couldn't lend it out, but this cash was sitting on their books as a liability. So they didn't want so they had too much cash. Sounds like a good problem to have, right? But if they're sitting as a liability,
It's
it's
like
really not a
sitting
good.
there, like, what can we do with this? But we have to,
We got to get this off of our books,
yeah.
and that's ultimately what they had to do was they had to. Uh, I forget what exactly it was, but it was they I forget what exactly they had to do, but like the first thing they did was like people that wanted to deposit money with these banks, they just said don't deposit the money here. Go buy government bonds. so,
I remember what you're talking about.
so
It
yeah,
it took a while to get back in my head, but I remember what you were talking about. They were
right.
like talking
Which
to companies, and they were like, stop storing money with them.
Yeah,
Like,
well, yeah. So yeah, they're like go buy government bonds, and that's why I think there was I mean, the yield curve inverted in 2019, or if nothing else, it flattened and it maybe inverted for like 2 seconds, but it did invert for a bit in 2019.
they don't
You
like
know
to
what I
let it
mean?
invert for too long, but I
They
think it
don't.
did.
Well, and there's
They've
enough
learned enough by
programs
now.
out there. Yeah, there's enough programs out there that can
Mhm.
help it not invert,
Yeah,
right? So they can so they can I don't know, they can issue more bonds, right?
they have a lot
They
of
could
tools
do
at their disposal, to be
Yeah,
honest.
they could just announce a bond auction, and what happens when they
Mhm.
announce a bond auction? Now there's a quote unquote a semi supply shock in that certain bond, and it'll kind of, shock the price of the bond for a little bit. And, as people are kind of like getting their feet underneath themselves,
Hey, everybody. Thank you for listening. Due to editing, we're going to be breaking this interview up into a few segments. So if you enjoyed listening, please stay tuned and have a great day. Bye bye.